Is the City of Meridian Solid Waste Advisory Commission meeting, the regular meeting for Wednesday, February 24th. It is now 4 p.m. and we will start with roll call. Please indicate if you are connected or present. Mark Nelson.
Here.
Steve Corey, here. Scott Walters.
Here.
John Keating.
Here.
Megan Larson.
Here.
Karen Richmond.
Here.
Rand Spywick.
Here.
Isabel Cow. We'll move on to ex officio members. Rochelle Klein.
Here.
And Councilwoman Liz Strader.
Here.
Quorum being present, we'll go ahead and move on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any comments or?
So moved.
It's been moved to accept the agenda as written. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
And moved and seconded that we go ahead and approve the agenda as written. Further comments? Any comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of approving the agenda as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. We will then move on to approval of the January 27th minutes. Are there any comments on the draft minutes?
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the minutes as written.
I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the draft minutes be approved as written. Further comments? Any comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of approving the minutes as drafted signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. The motion passes. We will move then into community acknowledgement. And the only thing I have on here is that I've had passed on to me that there was a comment directed to the mayor's office, which the mayor's office responded to. But just so you are aware, a citizen went ahead and was commenting on the fact that they paid to get rid of a mattress. And that, of course, that would be on top of their monthly trash bill. And they were wondering if there was any possibility of wrapping that into the standard trash services. The mayor's office responded that variously discussing our current status, but the key point being with the transfer station here, it is hoped that it saved the citizen time and money in delivering the bulky item. No action required. I just want to go ahead and make sure that this item that's been received by the city is something that commissioners are aware a comment came in. And with that, we'll start moving into program reports. And the item under that is the first quarterly report. Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me just a moment. Can everybody see the quarterly report on their screen now? Perfect. All right.
Yes.
Well, we're just going to go over our October, November, December stats, and I'll just take it away from here. If it lets me. There we go. So we're trying a new format in this meeting, Mr. Chair and I discussed. We're going to be just comparing year-over-year stats from each specific type. So if you look at our residential trash tons by year, you'll see that in the first quarter of this year, we've had a bit of a drop off. And the theory that I have behind that, at least, is that with COVID, early on in COVID, people were at home a lot more and they were able to clean out and get a lot of stuff cleaned up and cleaned out and get gone. Now people are doing a lot of things where they're getting items delivered to their home in cardboard. So I think we're going to see some recycle number differences, but I think overall the trash numbers themselves are going to be a little bit lower because people are tending to recycle more of the items that they're using rather than throw them away. We've also got a pretty good amount of diversion programs now at the transfer station, especially glass, which is a rather heavy commodity, which could also have a good leaning as to why our trash tonnage is a little bit lower year over year. If we get into our trash pounds per household per month, again, you're going to notice it's a sharp decline in 2020 from 2018 or 2019. I think the same thing applies, that obviously if tonnage is lower, then the household amount will be lower per household. But even as we're expanding households, I think our recycling is going up, whereas our generated trash is kind of plateauing or going down a little bit as our recycling volumes increase. Now, if we get into our recycle tons, you'll note more or less exactly what I said has come to fruition. You'll see we've had a pretty dramatic increase in Q1 of 2020 compared to 2018 and 2019. I mean, you're talking almost 100-ton difference December to December, year over year. Our pounds per household, again, it held steady in October, but as we continue to see the recycling participation jump up, we're at 97% of residences recycling now. I think you'll see that number will begin to climb as we continue on month after month throughout. And I think most of that is due to people being at home and having most of their commodities delivered in cardboard boxes and cardboard shipping. To our oops, or what are we not doing quite right? You'll see that we've had a few more tags in October, and then we had a huge jump of tags in December. And after discussing that with Republic, a lot of those were probably carts that were not out and they were getting logged as not out. So they weren't physically tagged necessarily, but they were noted that they were not out for service. So they were virtually tagged using Republic's Connect system, which is another really cool way of us being able to track where we're having some issues. In the realm of recycle carts, aside from the auspiciously ironic 666 number in October, you'll note that there was actually a drop in recycle carts that were tagged in 2020 as opposed to 2019. And my guess is that is more of the higher amount of people participating, generating more recycling, and generally having at least slightly better understanding of what goes into the recycle stream. In our subscription services, you'll note that our grass numbers are growing every year, which is steady increases, exactly what I've been looking for. They are trending down slightly, a loss of 4 from October to December. But I think as we continue to get into March and April, we'll see that number creep up past 400 as more and more people are learning about the program. We found that when we started really advertising, we saw a marked increase from 2018, 2019, and moving forward into 2020. Our glass service, you'll note that there is an NA there for 2020. One of the things we did due to the effects of COVID is we did suspend glass service for the month of November. It was only one collection for residences. We got 0 complaints about it. We made sure residents were aware of it. So it wasn't something that really seemed to draw a lot of ire, but our glass accounts have been going down. But I think a lot of that is due to multiple households combining, because it's not necessarily easy to fill up a 65-gallon cart every month. So I think what I have seen and have talked to people about is 2 and 3 houses combining to split the cost of a glass container, and then, just putting it out monthly. And then also our huge amount of usage at our glass drop site. I mean, we're just getting literally tons and tons of glass every month. We are a very active glass drop site at the transfer station. And with that, does anyone have any questions for me?
Tom, it might be helpful for us new folks if you could add on the appropriate slides the number of households so that we can see the growth of households, and then we could compare that to the tonnage per household or whatever it is per household. You obviously have the data because you're calculating it to come to the unit per household that you're describing.
Oh, absolutely, Commissioner Spiewak. I will send that out in the accompanying documents that the commission gets after the meeting today.
You just wait till the next report and be fine for me, but it might be easier to look at and see what the change in the total volume versus what's actually happening.
Understood.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman.
Basic question, Tom. What does it mean if a cart is tagged? For those of us that may not understand, like, what does that mean?
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Strader, trash tagging is it's one of the forms of communication that our franchisee Republic has to let people know that they're not doing something right. So it's a little it's a triplicate little cardboard card that the driver will fill out at the time of service, and they'll say, you know, what was the reason that something was wrong with your container? So was it not in a safe place? Was there something that shouldn't be in the container? Was it overfilled? And then they'll take a copy of that card for them. They'll leave a hard copy on the cart after service. And that way they can let people know in the least confrontational way, hey, it didn't work this time, but we're going to take it. And that also lets them monitor who is not being cognizant of the rules of actually getting their cart serviced.
Got it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Tom.
Commissioner Keating.
Hey, the uptick on the recycling, I mean, that's incredibly exciting news. That is there a way that we can explain to the citizens of Meridian that they're doing a fantastic job with the recycling and with the increase of recycling household wise? Because I mean, that's really good news. And thank you for sharing.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Keating, I think there are a number of ways we could look into doing that, the least of which would be the trash talk page, but I've been looking into ways to work with Republic and our communications team to write something up for one of our billing newsletters that everyone will get that pays a trash bill, as the way to note that we've jumped from 92 to 97% participation and that our contamination rate has gone down.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really exciting.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman Strader.
Sorry, Tom, what you said just confused me a little bit. Did you say the contamination rate is going down? Because I thought we had a contamination issue.
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Strader, our contamination issue is at the transfer station recycle site. Our curbside contamination rate, according to Western Recycling, has been trending downward over the last several months to years.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Rochelle, could you speak to whether this increase in the amount of material recycling, is that something that's being seen in other municipalities besides Meridian?
Is it on now? Okay, I got it. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, so we have been seeing an increase in recycling during COVID. For the last year, we've been slowly seeing the numbers increase as people have been ordering more materials to be delivered to their houses. So a lot of it is cardboard that we're picking up. And I think one of the good questions that was asked was, is it organic growth based on the additional number of households, or is it an increase in the amount of recycling per household on a monthly basis? So it looks like maybe we can get that information. Once we have the household counts, we'll have a better idea of what's going on at the household level, but we are seeing across the valley an increase. Did you want to add anything to that, Bob? And Mr. Chairman and Tom, I guess the most important thing too is that the material is really clean that we're getting. So I think that's really important to note that as we're increasing the volume, we're not increasing the amount of trash we're packing into the recycling carts. That's really important.
Members of the commission, are there additional comments on the material that's been presented?
I just like to thank Tom for, I appreciate the way you presented the data today. It's a lot easier for me to kind of track. So thanks for accommodating my ability to read. But no, it was much easier to understand.
Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. And you will be receiving the entire presentation packet after the meeting.
As far as the ongoing members of the commission, certainly we've had other information that's been included in the reports that we receive. If there's any of that that you were using for your tracking purposes that we need to add to this presentation, please comment to myself or to Tom, and we'll go ahead and improve the information that's collected. One thing I should ask, unique to the first quarter, is the collection of leaves through our leave program. And Tom, could you speak to how that's compared to previous years?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In previous years, in 2018, 1,130 tons of leaves were collected curbside in the city of Meridian. In 2019, that dropped down to 906 tons, but I think that was due to the much later fall we had in 2019. And then last year, we had our leaf boxes that were added to several of the parks around the city, 8 parks to be exact. And when you factor out the contaminated loads, 952 tons of leaves were collected last year. So at least to staff's view, having those park containers was a boon, not rather than a burden to our leaf collection efforts to continue to get more material diverted from our waste stream at the landfill.
Any last comments from any of the commissioners on the quarterly report? Very good, then we'll go ahead and move on. The next item is old business. There's nothing in that, so we'll move on to new business. And the first item in new business is anaerobic digester presentation. Tom, I think you're going to go ahead and, oh. Come on up here to the microphone. I assume it's probably on, Tom. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Paul Woods, and I'm a resident here in the Treasure Valley. I'm also a biogas developer. I've spent many years in the biogas development space. I founded a company called Sort Bioenergy that was focused on food waste recovery using anaerobic digestion as a technology. We were partnered with Republic Services for a contract in the Portland metro market to process organics, food waste. That project didn't move forward for some interesting reasons, but I'll go into that. I'm also the founder of a company here in Idaho called Magic Valley Bioenergy, and we own and operate a manure digester facility. So I have to have a couple of disclaimers, I guess, before I get going here. So the views today, or the information that I'm sharing, is that of my own, doesn't reflect the views or the opinion of Republic Services, doesn't reflect the views of one of my former partners, Steve Sedlacek, who I think all of you know, and it does not reflect the views or opinions of my current employer, which is Jacobs Engineering, the former CH2M Hill. So I was asked today to talk a little bit about anaerobic digestion, but I like to start any discussion about that with just organics diversion in general. Of course, with any waste stream, we want to start with reducing and not generating it, and there are many efforts afoot to try to eliminate food waste in the community. I think you even have one of those discussion items on the agenda later. But to the degree you have food waste or green waste, you have material like leaves and twigs that do not generate biogas or will not generate biogas. But you also have waste that's yard waste, maybe residential waste that, really its biogas potential can go either way. You can either, that material is better suited for compost or in some cases anaerobic digestion. But then you have commercial food waste, which is really high in organic content, difficult to compost, is ideal for anaerobic digestion. And so when we talk about that material, I think it's important to take a step back and look at what its ultimate potential is. There's the potential to recover the energy value in that material. So in food waste, we have carbon, we have hydrogen that can be converted to methane through anaerobic bacteria. So there's the ability to recapture energy in food waste. But there's also nutrients there. You have nitrogen, you have phosphorus. Those are things that are necessary for life. Those are things that we need to produce additional food. And so, there's an opportunity to recover nutrients. And then there's certainly an opportunity not to take up landfill space, with that material. So those are the opportunities, but all of this is proven technology. The constraint is always, affordability. Is it something that people are willing to pay, a price for? And that's something that really is, site specific. So for me, the development of projects of this nature has been a hodgepodge of private development efforts or municipal development efforts. And when you drill down to each and every one of these opportunities, you find out that it really depends on the conditions, on the ground and the specific site conditions that you have. Everything from the waste shed, the density of that material, how much collection, requires, and, the nature of that material. Is it rich in a variety of organic carbon, or is it kind of more monolithic of one kind? But I want to use a couple of examples to just maybe illustrate, how interesting this whole food waste recovery anaerobic digestion is. One of the examples that's held out, one of the oldest in the country, is called the East Bay Municipal Utility District. That's a large wastewater utility in the Bay Area that was constructed, in the 60s and 70s. And at the time, there were a number of food producers that discharged wastewater into that utility. And over time, those food producers moved out. And so this utility had a whole anaerobic digestion tank farm. They literally had 10 digesters that weren't being put to use. And so they were looking to say, how can we make use of those? And so they started a food waste diversion program in the Bay Area, and they brought that material to East Bay Mud, and they processed that material and made tons of biogas, made tons of electricity with that biogas. It was really unique, and people heralded as, well, this is what the future can be. But there's two important things that I think, people need to be aware of with that example. One, there was really no capital cost in construction of those anaerobic digesters. Anaerobic digesters are capital intense. These were stranded assets that were doing essentially nothing. So by bringing in outsourced material, you were making use of an asset that had already been paid for by ratepayers. The second thing is that they discharge into the bay, essentially the ocean, and believe it or not, they didn't have nitrogen or phosphorus removal requirements. So they really weren't recovering the nutrients. They were just discharging those into the ocean. And so, with anaerobic digestion, you do recover the energy, but you do need to think about how you recover the nutrients. There are other examples of anaerobic digestion that use different technologies, a dry anaerobic fermentation process that lends itself better for removal of that material, converting it to compost, and making beneficial reuse of the nutrients. There's fewer of those examples, and the ones that exist tend to be publicly funded. There's a community digester project in Wisconsin, that, for instance, that's at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, I think, where they do this. There's also, the opportunity to just take all this and just say we're going to capture the nutrient value, not the energy value, and that's really composting. And so we have plenty of examples of composting throughout the country, here in the Valley. In those markets where they take commercial food waste, what you find is they struggle with odor control, odor issues. And, Seattle would be a market where that's been a problem. Portland's a market where that's been a problem. Commercial food waste is hard put enough air in to convert that process to aerobic decomposition that, it tends to create odors. So for me, in my experience, what cities need in order to evaluate whether or not anaerobic diversion, from a landfill makes sense, really is determined by the factors on the ground. When you put organic material in a landfill, you can recover the biogas. Now, it really depends on your cover efficiency, how quickly you cover it, so it's not emitted atmospherically, but surely there's no recovery of the nutrients for the most part. For a compost program, we talked about that, but what is hard for a city is to determine, how much it's going to cost, both in capital and in operation, and then how those costs relate to revenues and how you can provide rate certainty going forward. Projects of this nature that rely on energy revenue as a means to pay down the capital and to fund operating are operating in a market that's pretty volatile. The renewable energy market for biogas, if it's converted to electricity, it's renewable energy certificates, which the price of those have gone up and down and up and down and up and down, plus the base load of the power. If it's renewable natural gas, it gets even more complicated, where you get paid for the heating value. The federal renewable fuel standard, which expires in 2023, and then if you can demonstrate that your gas touches an interstate pipeline, you wheel it into California, and you can get renewable or low carbon fuel standard. That market has gone up and down. EPA is, tended to grant waivers and not grant waivers in that process. If you're producing renewable natural gas, you need to get it into vehicle fuel. There's a whole process by which, that is done. It can add a lot of value, but it can be volatile. And I think, the importance there is to add rate stability. But I do think that there are opportunities here in the Valley that, make sense, for evaluation. And I think, for a municipality to look at an opportunity for organics diversion and having energy recovery and nutrient recovery, you really want to make sure that you invest upfront in determining those details in order to determine whether the project's feasible. What has tended to happen in the industry in the past is people like myself will come and say, I'll incur that expense once you give me the rights to that material for 15 or 20 years. And once you do that, you're in a situation that's, hard to back out of. And so, my experience is that, if you want to look at these things, which I think, makes some sense, you want to invest some money in doing your own feasibility analysis, bringing in people that have expertise in the technology, bringing in your collection service, looking at what the cost of collection is. In my mind, then you remain in control. You make sure all the variables are checked. You can look at all the contingency plans and sort of retain that ownership. If you just outsource that to someone through a long-term contract, those examples have been, extremely problematic. So the example that I went through and, Republic Services went through in the Portland market was the city, put out a RFP for food waste processing. And that was to process, this low range of material to this high range of material. So you had to provide the ability to operate within that complete range. And from a capital perspective, that was very difficult because you had to invest at the top range. And if you were only going to recover that investment with the low range of material, that really had a huge impact on price. The second thing was there was argument back and forth about what is the quality of the material, right? If you are trying to guarantee, a certain organic content of the waste, that is exceedingly problematic. And, trying to make those warranties, those representations, is exceedingly difficult. But what we found is that as, the municipality put layer upon layer of we want this, we want this, we want this, there wasn't any real feasibility analysis on what the community was willing to pay for. They were going to do it no matter what the cost, and that turned out to be politically problematic at the end. I mean, they still haven't done that. In addition to that, Portland has a situation similar to East Bay Mud, where the city of Portland discharges their wastewater into the Columbia River, and they don't have a requirement to recover nitrogen or phosphorus. So you make the argument that a food waste diversion program that co-digests at the wastewater treatment plant is just, taking the carbon and hydrogen, making energy, but dumping the nutrients in the Columbia River, where they serve really no benefit at all other than to, grow nuisance algae if that's what happens. But so, and I think unique to Portland Metro, which is not unique here, they have an open market for collection. And so you had, the ability to, flow control was one that legally became a sticking point, where the determination of whether this material is, truly waste or, recycling, or what it was, and the community or the government's ability to control it was problematic. I don't see Meridian facing that. I don't see Ada County facing that. So there is a really unique opportunity here. I think anaerobic digestion is a proven technology. It's been around for 150 years. The issue of co-digestion with municipal wastewater treatment plants, I think, is really problematic here in the Valley, but that doesn't mean that that's the only opportunity. I think there's other anaerobic digestion technologies that make sense to enable you to both recover the energy and the nutrient value and do it in a way that is economically palatable here in the community. So that's my presentation, written down on this sheet of paper right here. Didn't have any fancy slides to go with, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members of the commission, obviously, we don't have any money or resources under our control and such. I think what has been indicated to me is that the city would just like to go ahead and have this run through our commission. And if we see fit to go ahead and recommend to staff that they continue to look into the subject. Given that, are there any questions or comments from the commissioners on the material that's been presented?
Mr. Chairman, my daughter and son-in-law lived in Boston, and I witnessed firsthand over the 3 years that he was at Harvard in grad school, just how pitiful the digestible recycling project was, and what residents had to do. I don't know how well it worked on the commercial side, but for residential, it is a total pain in the you-know-what. And people were not doing it because you had a little container, you had to, with recycled or biodegradable bags, you had to fill it up. It came by once every, I think in Boston, it was more than a week. So you had not such a sweet smelling device that sat under your sink. If you put it outside, the animals got to it. I don't know how successful they really were, and I don't know what cities have been more successful in what they've done to encourage folks to just, it's all the labor the residents have that I'm more concerned about than what it would cost us to have a facility to handle the digestion.
Mr. Wood, I don't know if you have actually considered, is this something to support commercial clients or residential clients or both?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, so on the collection side, that's a whole nother element of the project that is not necessarily my expertise. I think Republic Services has examples around the country where, that's been done. I can tell you from an anaerobic digestion side that kind of what you want is what he's talking about, those little, buckets of material. But whether that, makes sense or not, other communities tend to just blend it in with yard waste and make compost of that. What the anaerobic digestion system wants is the stuff that's, the good, true food waste. But it's a balance, right? I mean, if the, what's the old saying, the squeezing's not worth the juice, I mean, I'm just talking about the technology and the processing. And I guess that's what I'm alluding to. It's a complete, analysis from the waste shed to collection to what, individuals have to do. That's a very valid point. And I'm sure, maybe you guys can come up with other examples of, a lot of communities have different examples of what they, have required people to do and how they've reacted to that.
Mr. Chair, could you say a little bit more about what council is asking SWAC for? You said that having staff look into it a little further. Can you expand at all on what that entails or what they're hoping for?
There's a level of information that needs to be put together such that it is something that could be considered by council and by the commission. And that's what I was alluding to, but I'm going to turn it over to Tom to maybe talk about what kind of investigation would be put together and what kind of product would be put together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the commission, at this stage, since this is purely informational, we'd have to compile a lot of knowledge. So what we'd be looking for would be the commission to direct staff to continue to look at building essentially not necessarily a pro forma, but really digging into what would be required, what kind of startup time it would take, what kind of capital output it would take, what kind of flow requirements there would be. We'd look into container size, collection frequency. You'd look into everything that would essentially build the program and then present that and see if the commission then thought that was worthy to get recommended to present to council. So there'd be a lot of internal research that would happen, and then another presentation will be brought to the commission once all the internal research was completed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tom. So the question before us is not, do we go forward with a program like this, but the question before us is, do we spend time researching, dedicating staff resources of the city to evaluating a program or developing something? Is that
correct?
And I guess that's the cost benefit versus, what other things what is staff not doing that they could be doing? What are we foregoing? I mean, my inclination is sure, it's valuable to take a look and consider, innovative programs that reduce our landfill. I don't have a sense of why staff couldn't do that, or what the cost of staff spending time on that versus something else are.
Mr. Chairman, one thing, and commissioners, one thing I might add is that this would be viewed as a regional asset. So, maybe staff takes the lead here in Meridian, but maybe the prison, for example, all their food waste would go into this digester and reduce their costs at the landfill, or, or other cities, or maybe some of our industrial customers like the hospitals and, regionally the hospitals, or, Boise State, or some of our larger food waste generators may be interested in it as well. So it would be probably, my recommendation if staff carries it forward would be to look at it from a residential and commercial perspective, and then maybe as a regional, I guess, view, more than just a city only view, because I think other municipalities would probably be interested in the findings as well. Not that it's Meridian's job, but I'm just saying that whatever comes out of this, I think it'd be great to shop it with other cities as well and see if there's interest. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Strader.
Seems intriguing, Tom. I guess compare this to like regular composting to me. So what does it smell like? It like the facility itself? Does it have a big odor? Like, what are some of the possible benefits? I'm hearing energy could come from it. What could we do with that energy? Like, not that we don't know those answers, but kind of like, I don't know, sell me a little bit on why we could explore it or what the advantages might be to just looking into it. If it were all of the, cards were to line up and it was to work, what kind of benefits would we get from this kind of technology?
Thank you, Councilwoman Strader, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So there's a lot of ways to look at the benefits we get from it. We'd be able to take a much larger diversity of material. You'd be able to build, if this was to be built by anyone, they'd be able to look into taking it from multiple different municipalities. Anaerobically, there's not a smell until the material gets pulled out, but the material you pull out of an anaerobic digester can then be taken and composted at other sites. You'd be creating a gas that could either create electricity, could create heat to run the site, could also be used to, depending on who built it, it could literally power the garbage trucks that collect the material. I mean, you're talking about a very large impact area. So you could use this material for a bevy of options. You could also market the material, and you could significantly be able to control and reduce any amount of gas that is flared or generated from, say, just a place where it's aerobically composted. So you're getting that energy utilization, and then you'll still have a material that can be used to create a soil amendment after the fact.
Mr. Chair, Tom, could you just say a couple additional words about diversity of materials? So compared to what can be thrown in the digester versus what can be composted? Is that what you're referring to?
I will actually push that one to our speaker, our presenter, because I think he's going to have a little bit more information on exact material types.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we see in commercial food waste is material that has a very high energy value that's easily converted to energy through anaerobic digestion. And when you take that material and you try to not anaerobically digest it, but just aerobically convert it to compost, the experience across the country is that's when you get higher levels of odor. That's when you get more stink. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of air, a lot of turning to take those materials that are very rich in, whether it's, fats or meats or, vegetables in a highly concentrated form. You try to convert those to compost, you tend to get odor problems. And in anaerobic digestion, you're taking it, you're grinding it, you're introducing it into a tank that has no air, and you're allowing anaerobic bacteria to convert the carbon and the hydrogen into methane, which is then an energy source. And so, the odor with an anaerobic digester is really just associated with the handling, the material prior to putting it into the digester. Once it's in the digester, there's no odors that emit from the digester itself.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Strader.
So I guess I'd be curious if Republic had an initial reaction to this as well. It sounds like there's large upfront capital cost with these types of projects. Is the Portland example, it sounded like was a bad example. It didn't work out, but are there good examples of, a city where this has worked out, or where Republic has partnered up to do something together with a municipality or a biogas company, if I'm following?
I'll answer and then turn it over to Republic. There's examples in the Northeast of facilities that take source separated food waste through anaerobic digestion. They operate fine from a technology standpoint. It's always the economics that tend to trip, these projects up. So you see, more in the Northeast, anaerobic digesters that tend to take food waste into digesters that are on dairy farms, that are already digesting, manure, and then they bring that material in for, additional biogas production. But there's limitations to that. That increases the nutrient load, on the farm. And the whole idea is they beneficially reuse those nutrients, but you don't want to over apply the nutrients. But I think throughout, the country, you have a smattering of places where this works and it doesn't. It's really about the particulars, of the community. It would not be right, I think, to paint a broad brush to say this works or doesn't work. It really depends on the community. It is a significant capital investment, and the longer that you can commit, it's an asset that has a long useful life. These tanks are typically made out of steel or concrete. They'll have, 30 to 50-year useful life. So, the longer that you can commit to a program, the more you can structure, the debt associated with building of the asset, the more reasonable the rates can be. And so you see that, all over the country, but I'll turn it over to Rochelle to add to that response.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I would say that we do have food waste collection programs throughout the country, and some of it is composted and some of it is digested. And I know that, like Paul said, that we do have issues with odor when we do compost it. And what I can commit to doing is pulling most of the digesters that we currently use are third party, so they're not owned by Republic Services. But what I can do is get back to you with a list of, digesters that we do utilize in our hauling services, and maybe get some more information from them, and bring that back to this group, if that works for you guys. We don't have one currently here, but I know we have programs that run, from West Coast to East Coast that do take food waste. So I can get back to you with that information, if that works. Or I can provide it to Tom and he can forward it.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Strader.
I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm not very familiar with the technology. I'd rely on my fellow SWAC veterans that have longer in the saddle with evaluating these things. I guess to Commissioner Randy's point, I think for residential users, there would be a learning curve and a real question about feasibility, convenience, odor. I wonder though what's possible. I mean, for commercial users as well, seems like it could be a really cool regional solution, and that's the only basis that it would work under. When people explore this, do they do a feasibility study? Like, what is involved in exploring it, I guess, is my question to Tom. Like, would it be really, is it staff time digging into this for a bit and then a feasibility study, or like, how would you walk through that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Strader. If staff were going to get into this, we would start initially with, we'd get into the feasibility of actually getting the program started through we'd be working with Republic on that one since they're our existing contractor. We'd look at cart size, frequency of collection, we'd start looking into what would be the tipping fees for the material, the cost structure for the program itself. So would it be supported by strictly tipping fees? Would it be supported by a combination of tipping fees and harvested gas? Would it be supported by offsets? We'd go into that. Then we'd start looking into, we know from the survey that it's a program that's in demand. So we'd start looking into participation rates. Do we spin it into our current service offerings? So trash, recycle, compost, or do we look at having it be a subscription program? Or do we look at it being as an optional program that's still in the city rates? So, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that would go into it, and I can only give you that brief synopsis off the top of my head.
Thanks. I guess the hard thing is, do we have the right waste shed, or whatever the terminology was that our speaker referred to? Do we have the right stuff? I think is part of the question. This is really interesting to me. I don't know. I'll pipe down so the others can ask their questions.
Mr. Chair, in answer to your question, Councilwoman Strader, if we were to go with an all-in program, residentially, commercially, and industrial at the same time, then yes, we would have the material that would make pretty good gas and pretty good anaerobic digestion component.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Walters.
Can you clarify, Tom or whomever, the type of junk that we're tossing in there? Is that old chicken bones and skin? Is it, steak and meat? Is it all organic, leafy, green materials? Is it both? Is it the cooking oil that's now wasted and can't use it anymore because it's already used up? What can go in there? Just name a few articles that would be digested.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Walters, I will again nod to our presenter to give you a better knowledge than I can give.
Thank you. There always gets to be the question of, is it pre-consumer or post-consumer? I mean, to answer the first question, meats are good. Bones, are fine. It depends on what kind of an anaerobic digester you have. If you have one that's going to be more liquefied, those bones, there's energy in there, but then that becomes grit, at some point. Oils, the cooking oils are good, but you need to make sure that they don't just float to the top. You need to kind of mix those around. Those are great energy. Oil in particular has a lot of energy potential, no real residual solids, but fats, oils, and grease by themselves, you really need other substrates to make it work. Grass and leafy greens produce less biogas, but they work. But, dried material, leaves, no. Sticks, no. You really want, and if you were just going to have, grass, that's not, great, biogas potential. When you get into pre-consumer, that's, in a prep kitchen or at Albertsons before it's been sold to anybody, that stuff has a lot of energy. When you get into post-consumer, what you tend to get with the meats is, a fork, a knife, a plate, whatever. And that's, that gets to be more of a, material handling issue. It doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. It's just you have more, debris or contamination that you have to deal with.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Tom, the concept of just the looking at this would the businesses, you mentioned Albertsons with how would they be on board? Would Costco, would Winco, that would be a big selling point to get all that food into the program itself that would be amazing. But
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Keating, that's one of the pieces we'd be evaluating. So in order to make a really robust, durable program, we would want to have that commercial component to really supplement the residential. And in the concept of anaerobic digestion, that commercial food waste would actually probably be the more important component, and the residential collection would be a supplement to that. So in the exploration, we would definitely be looking at businesses, reaching out to businesses, asking them about their willingness to participate and desire to participate.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, I think what you see in every community is, those grocery stores are trying to minimize food waste, right? So they're trying to make donations, to food banks before the material expires. And that's great. We want to see good use of that, not just come to the digester. But just understanding how that dynamic flows in your community is important. You also see use of this material for animal feed. And every market has a different demand for animal feed because it's highly dependent on transportation. So, that plays a role, too. But, from what Tom has said and what I've looked at too, all those efforts aside, there's still a considerable amount of commercial food waste that gets generated in the community where there could be a much higher and better use of that material, and diverting it out of the landfill too. And as Tom said, it doesn't have to be a mandatory program. It can be a subscription, participatory. I think the example in the Northeast, many of those programs started out as mandatory, and that's what tended to tank them too.
Mr. Chairman and Commission, there's also the option of shared resources too. So for example, I'll just use the village as an example. We have a compactor out in Caldwell that, for example, if it was used at the village, could be workable for restaurants there. And there are a lot of restaurants obviously at the Village, but let's say they bag their food waste in these compostable bags or digestible bags, and they have a code on the compactor and they drop their food waste in the compactor, and we know who's putting what in there and they get charged accordingly. And we wind up picking up a whole compactor full of a post-consumer food waste from the Village, for example. So it's a shared cost structure. So, you know, businesses would get charged based on the amount of times they actually type in their code and use the compactor. But I think there are lots of strategies out there that, you know, we could bring as possibilities to Tom to look at. And I think food waste is one of the top topics around the country at this point in time, that food waste is huge, and it's, you know, methane generating always. When it's done, it's going to generate methane somewhere, either in a digester or in a landfill or being composted or somewhere. So the question is, does it make sense to beneficially capture and reuse that methane as either a transportation fuel or a renewable natural gas just in the pipeline, or as electricity? So I think there are lots of right ways to the finish line, is what I'd say.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions for Tom. Refresh my memory a little bit on where composting and digestion type projects fell in our roadmap that we worked on over a year ago, it seems like. So if that just is kind of in line with what we were intending to address, because like I said, I'm struggling to remember. And I'm just curious, we were talking about grasses and other things. Would a program like this compete in any way with some of our other programs like yard waste and those sorts of things? So we kind of have to keep those splits. And then I guess I'm going to throw all my questions at once at you. And the last one is, where does the energy generated fit in kind of a classification? So many municipalities or states are really wanting to tag renewable or green or those sorts of things. And the energy generated from something like this, where does that fall in that category of energy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Nelson, you threw me quite a fastball there. To answer your first question, diversion programs specific to organic material falls into a plan within our 5-year window of what we would like to have solved in the initial discussions of the solid waste plan. It's a very high priority item, and it's one that took a lot of our attention and a lot of our resources, I should say resources of writing, but took a lot of the resources and is a very high priority item in the plan. In the next 5 years, we wanted to be able to have a robust, durable program, a robust, durable, sustainable program. Question 2, I forgot what question 2 was, so could you happen to ask that one again?
Yeah, I was just curious if these materials compete with any other programs, if we're redirect to a digester, then we don't commit as much, say, yard waste or other things.
Understood.
To other programs we've already kind of kicked off.
So a program such as this, we'd want to have it be a citywide program, ideally, in order to get enough material to really run efficiently. And it would kind of tag on to our grass program. So it would just, people who are already participating would be able to participate and just have an expansion of items that they could then put into the container. If we went as a citywide included program, then people with a grass cart would just keep that grass cart. It would roll into their city rates, and people we'd just hand out the rest of the carts. So it wouldn't necessarily compete. It would be the same program, just wildly improved. And then to your energy question, that would be classified as renewable energy. It would be RNG, renewable natural gas, that would be generated.
All right, well, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Sorry. Point of clarification, if I can. So it was stated that grass and limbs and stuff wouldn't work well in the digester, so we would keep those aside for composting. And so I don't think that would be a conflict. Am I correct with that, Tom?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Walters, they're not the ideal piece, but they could be kind of dosed in with much better, higher grade material. So we wouldn't have to remove those. We would just want them in with the higher grade material to mix through. They wouldn't be a good base product to put in an anaerobic digester. They're more amiable to aerobic composting. But if you're not just trying to get energy from those or gas from those, and you're just parsing those in with more high energy, high yield materials, then you wouldn't have to take those out of your stream. That's what, at least in my opinion, from the research I've done, one of the advantages of anaerobic digestion is that you can have additional materials that can go in supplemental to the really high yield materials and not have it really damage your generation of material of gas and energy.
Mr. Chairman, so just, I know, Paul, you're probably done with the redundancy here. So it's just really woody debris and high carbon stuff like leaves, right? That would need to be kept out. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Rochelle, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be kept out. It's just not going to produce any biogas. But remember, coming out of the digester, our goal is to create compost. So it's just fine, you know, that utilization. So, you know, that's, it's not a contaminant that messes up the anaerobic digestion process. It just doesn't have any, you know, biogas generation potential, but it still will have nutrients and it will still be suitable with what you're going to make once you come out of the digester, which is hopefully a compost product that recycles the nutrients.
Okay, so the way I'm envisioning this is it's a two-step process. So you could put everything in one cart and it goes to the digester and it gets ground up and thrown in the digester, and then biogas is created, and what comes out the back end of the digester then is composted, and once it's composted, then we screen it and it's good to go. Is that oversimplified?
You know, essentially, I mean, I think that's where you start. I mean, as you find, you know, I would assume that you would sort of investigate, you know, the types of, you know, maybe on routes you're getting greener grass. I know that's a terrible saying versus, you know, other routes you're not getting as green grass, but, you know, you're going to want to kind of have some flexibility. I don't think this gets rid of the compost program. I think, you know, this provides another strategic asset, which you then fine tune your, you know, collection and diversion program, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, kind of based on the discussions we've had so far, and considering that it's in alignment with our roadmap, and it just seems reasonable that we ask staff to pursue collecting more information and at least vetting the concept enough to decide whether our neighboring city partners in the valley are interested also or not. And if it reaches a point where the research doesn't, is taking more time than we're getting back, then we can kind of report at that point, or maybe we get a lot of support in the area. I don't know, but I think it warrants further research, and it's in line with what our goals were in our roadmap. So it seems reasonable. We recommend the staff move forward. I don't know how to frame the limitations of that research. So I'd lean on them to kind of know that for us.
Tom, would it be appropriate to then identify an expectation for you to report back to the commission in 3 months or something like that? Or
Mr. Chair, I think I could get a pretty good handle on the information, it not to exceed 3 months. So perhaps we put something on that, like an expectation of coming back with the information in a time period not to exceed 90 days, or perhaps make it a little more open-ended and just say when I've gathered enough information to make a viable presentation to the commission. 'Cause I think within 3 or 4 months, I'd be able to really vet out just about every piece of it that we'd need to.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Strader.
Thanks a lot, Tom. It seems super intriguing. I think there's a real interest in the city on composting in general and a focus on food waste. So I see that alignment. In a way, it could be an advantage to other methods of compost. Like I can see that there's some good potential. So I mean, and then I guess would you then, if it was viable and it seemed workable and it went through SWAC at some point, I think it would have to be presented to city council as sort of a solution or a recommendation that's more fleshed out. Like we recommend a voluntary residential program people can sign up for, and we think there's enough commercial use to support it, and here's how it's going to work, and here's what it'll cost. I think if you ask city council to try to pick one of those paths, it would be really hard. So I think it would just have to be the most viable way it could work would be presented, would be my recommendation if it was to go to that point. You just have folks that we all care a lot about it, but I don't think they'd have the expertise to like guide some of those decisions completely in terms of, I think exploring the regional part is important, the commercial part and the residential, like having that all rolled up would be my suggestion.
Mr. Chair. Councilwoman Strader, to respond to your question and your points, before it was presented to SWAC, I'd have a recommendation based on where to go. And then SWAC's job would be to review my presentation and then make a recommendation that we present to council with recommendation to follow path X. So before I would present the vetted information to you, I would have a recommended pathway to take.
Got it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Tom, thank you for that. I mean, the time and looking into this. This is interesting. The concept is great. Thank you.
Members of the commission, additional comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to further vet the anaerobic digestion option and develop a proposal to council if the research indicates that anaerobic digestion would be a viable option.
I second that. Thank you, Megan.
It's been moved and seconded to direct staff to go ahead and do further investigation. Are there further comments on the motion? Further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of directing staff to go ahead and further the investigation signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. With that, we will move on to the next item in new business, Republic's cart recycling presentation. Rochelle.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I was asked by Tom in the past month to just come back to the commission here and update everyone on what actually happens to carts once they're spent. And what we actually do with carts once we pull them off the street. So we see a churn of carts all the time, people moving to a larger cart or a smaller cart, or carts have a broken wheel or a handle or a lid. And so we're constantly swapping carts out on the street. And I think Tom wanted us to just share with you what happens to those carts. And so just from a high level, we recently, in the last couple of years, changed cart contract vendors. And so we now use Schaefer and Otto. Schaefer and Toter, which are two of our preferred vendors. Prior to that, we used a cart manufacturer that was called Otto. And the reason that's important is they're not all easily swapped out. So if you break a wheel on an Otto cart, then the Toter cart wheel won't work. So that being said, we have shifted inventory and we do recycle most of those carts. So, but we actually recycle very few because we are able to repair most of those. So once we get aligned with a vendor or two, we do stock those parts. So when someone switches up or down a size, we bring those carts back to our facility and we pressure wash them and we get them cleaned up and put new decals on them, and any repairs that need to be made are made, and then they're re-inventoried and cycled back out. So overall, I would say less than 10% of our carts are actually sent off for recycling, but they are recycling and they are recycled. And the contractor, I want to say it's Go Green, isn't it, Tom? We have used the same vendor around the country. It is called Go Green, and they do a great job for us. And oftentimes if we have a big shift in cart volume, like if we have more carts coming in than we can store, or if we need more carts, we share between business units. So we recently sent a lot of carts to Montana, and we have received carts in the past from our Utah business unit. So I guess the bottom line is these carts have a long, useful life. And we buy obviously high industrial grade, like very durable carts. And so those tend to last a long time before they're recycled, but less than 10% or fewer than 10% of those carts are actually recovered and sent off to the manufacturer or to Go Green to be ground and then reused in other plastic products. I don't know if did you need anything else besides that, or is that just a quick summary? So if you have any other questions and you need me to chase down, I'm happy to do that.
Members of the commission, do you have any questions or comments on the material that's been presented?
Mr. Chair, Rochelle, thank you for that.
You're welcome, Commissioner Keating. And I should have added that facilities that need carts on site for recycling, we're happy to provide those too. So some examples would be the bird sanctuary in the north end of Boise. We'll take a load of carts down there to hold bird seed, or at the prison when they wanted some carts for internal use of recycling, we will drop carts off there. So we do carts that are off brand or things like that. We do try to give those to different folks that might use them, just not for regular service, but for daily operations.
Members of the commission, any additional comments or questions? Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item of new business, which is multifamily recycling. Tom, I think you've got some material to present to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is a topic that has been brought up at multiple previous meetings, and I have compiled some data just to share with you, and then I will be seeking a recommendation at the end. So just to make you aware, right now in our city, only 17% of what would be considered multifamily complexes actually recycle. If you compare that to the overall recycle rate for commercial businesses, which multifamily units currently fall under, it's 48%. If you look outside of Idaho, around the country, multifamily complexes average by state depending between 18 and 26%. So we're very much on the low end of multifamily complexes that recycle. So with that said, the recommendation that I would be seeking, or the movement from SWAC, would be to take staff time, because this is another big part of our solid waste plan, to research outreach methods. What are the actual requirements to be a resident and fall under that commercial exemption to recycle, and then also to work on that outreach development piece to push multifamily resident recycling.
Mr. Chair,
yes, Commissioner Larson.
a question, Tom. Commercial exemption to recycling, what does that mean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Larson, currently in city code, there's the commercial exemption. Commercial businesses within the city of Meridian do not have to recycle. It's an optional service that they have to pay extra for.
Okay. Thank you. An additional question, I guess. So without the data, but just by observation, Tom, I think perhaps one of the barriers to recycling at multifamily might be contamination. Just having observed lots of garbage go into recycle containers where they exist. So does the outreach piece include helping landlords, property owners overcome that, or helping them figure out how to make it clean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Larson, the outreach would be on acceptable materials, how to recycle. Another big piece of the research we've been doing is having the recycling somewhere else so that it's not just next to a dumpster. So perhaps having a designated recycling area where items can be parsed out to where they go, sort of like a little mini recycle area at the transfer station, but without that trash option. So you would be disincentivizing people to dump trash in there because it would be more difficult than just going to a dumpster. That's part of the research that I want to work on, pending SWAC's recommendation.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add something to that. Tom and I also talked about starting multifamily complexes with just a cardboard only container, which would be like a 3-yard dumpster with a fitted locked lid with just a long narrow slit in it, just wide enough for cardboard. So you couldn't shove bags of trash in there. Maybe it's like 3 inches tall and maybe the length of just shy of the length of the container. So maybe starting with just cardboard and just box board or fiber board, and starting there. And if they do really well with that, maybe adding a cart for recycling the other materials or something. Tom and I talked about just easing multifamily complexes into recycling if they're not used to it. And mostly because of a lot of them have high turnover and some language barriers, and just, it's always really clear if it's cardboard only, or if it's cardboard and, just flattened dry food boxes, for example. That would make it really simple to get started.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Keating?
that, for having staff resource, as Tom said, I would make a recommendation to have that looked at. Tom seems very excited, and I think that would be a great thing, an opportunity to see it become better. I don't know if I said that clearer or correctly.
Are you trying to
Turn
make a
that into a
motion?
motion.
Yeah. I guess that, I guess I would be.
So making a motion that staff go ahead and work on the issue of multifamily recycling.
Mr. Chair, as a multifamily dweller, I would enthusiastically second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to direct staff to go ahead and investigate the multifamily recycling issue and make recommendations to the commission. Is there further comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure this is at the proper time to discuss this, but I naively when I read the agenda, thought you were talking about multi-residential sharing of our red and green cans. There's too many, our neighbors, we were together, saw too many folks putting recyclable materials in the garbage can because their recycle can that's only every 2 weeks was too full. So we made it an unofficial rule among the 15, 20 homes on my neighborhood that on Monday morning it's that any basket is available. Use yours, use your neighbors, but put the right materials in the right cans. And we haven't had the cans that stick open with everything hanging out that really make it hard for our drivers. That's been reduced. And we've had more ended up properly in recycle and not being just thrown away and go to the landfill immediately. it might just be something in the educational program that we do to let homeowners voluntarily work together to share those cans. Not part of your motion.
Anyway, comments or questions in relationship to the motion that's on the floor? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of directing staff to go ahead and research into the multifamily recycling issue and make recommendations back to the commission signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Thank you. And the next item under new business is commercial food waste reduction. I think probably in relationship to our first item, the anaerobic digestion presentation, this was some things that were going to be brought from staff. And I think I've been informed that a lot of them were covered in the previous item, so there's no need for us to go into this again or any further. And with that, we complete the items that are under new business. And we come to discussion of the next meeting. The next meeting would be March 24th. And I guess, are there any items that we need to be made aware of that need to be covered at the March meeting? If not, then Tom and I will go ahead and put together an agenda in a couple of weeks. And as always, if you've got any subjects that we need to delve into, forward them to Tom or myself, and we will work them into the agendas. So with that, then I will ask, is there any further items that we need to that need to be brought before the commission at this time for the February meeting? And sensing there are none, I would go ahead and say that the business that was before us has been completed. I do appreciate your participation in the meeting. We've definitely given the city a lot of things to think about, and it could be a very interesting future. And with that, then we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It is 5:22. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thank
have a
you.
great meeting.